Yeah, so my name is Brian. I live in Austin, Texas, but we do have offices in Moscow, Russia, and in Austin we have a group of about 12 lawyers by background.
Can you speak at the mic?
Sure. Can you hear me okay? So we were advising in ICOs, just from the legal perspective, back in the middle of 2017. One of our clients in particular was a South African-based group called Crypto 20. And they were our first major client to come to us from the inception of the ICO all the way through to the end. We helped with the white paper, we helped with all kinds of memoranda. And in that process, we, as a group of lawyers, decided to take a step back and look at what it was we were seeing. We thought, wow, okay, future of fundraising, ICOs. It's doing so well. It's explosive in 2017. And we thought we'd drill down on the ecosystem itself. And when we looked at it from just kind of taking a step back, we realized that there's one fundamental problem with ICOs. That is accountability. Now, I think most of you know ICOs work the following way. You launch an ICO by publishing your white paper. You have promises you make in your white paper about what you're going to build, what problems you're going to solve. You raise the funds, you close the ICO, you take those funds, and as far as the backers of that ICO are concerned, it's a bit of a hope and a prayer that you actually follow through with those ICOs. There's no way for the token holders in the ICO to know whether those promises are going to be kept. And that's the problem, the accountability problem between the ICOs themselves and the token holders. So we believe that we have identified the solution to this problem. It's a simple solution. It's escrow. And as we've been working in transactions, cross-border transactions for decades, and realized that escrow is a great application here. But as we came to understand better blockchain, we realized, now wait, okay, we can decentralize escrow. Typically, an escrow agent is the one who decides when funds are released. But in our case, we can decentralize that process. So I'll talk a little bit more about how that works and how escrow can solve the problem of accountability in ICOs. Decentralized escrow would work the following way. The funds that are raised in an ICO should not go directly to the ICO. They should in part go to the ICO, so they could launch the development of the project, but the majority of those funds in an ICO should go instead to an escrow wallet. That wallet would then release the funds in tranches according to whether the ICO meets its milestones, the promises made in the white paper itself. So when milestones are met, funds are released, and the ICO progresses. Now again, whether those milestones are met is the real question, and who determines whether those milestones are met is the conundrum. So we again thought, let's decentralize that process. Instead of having an oracle, a banker, a lawyer be the one deciding when milestones are met and funds are released, that should be pushed to the backers themselves. So the people who buy the tokens, the investors, are the ones who vote on whether milestones are met and therefore funds are released. Now, this is all, of course, on a smart contract, and it's automated because it's a smart contract. And the voting takes place on the blockchain, so it's transparent. And that creates a lot of benefits to the ecosystem. Now we have a situation where the funds are released according to the decision of the backers. That means that the ICO itself has to communicate with those backers on the lead up to the vote process. So now we have a communication incentive that wasn't there before. We have ICO backers who are participating in the decision process, and we have communications that weren't happening before. I should point out that the ICO backers can actually vote to return the funds if the ICO itself turns out to be a scam, or if the backers themselves, the ICO founders themselves, disappear or flake or abuse the funds. So here's the way a transaction would work. In a decentralized escrow situation, the funds would go into the escrow wallet, and then the vote would occur. But this mechanism is not a rigid one. Every ICO is different. Every ICO has its milestones, its budget, its development concerns. So the way this works is we, at our organization, and other decentralized escrow opportunities could do the same. There's a control panel where each of the milestones are set. The parameters of those milestones are recorded, the percentages, the dates with respect to those. It could be 1 milestone, it could be 10. Those are all fixed prior to the ICO launch. The contract is then published. It's made available for the public, for the potential investors to review and rely on. And that contract is then where the funds are deposited. That smart wallet is where the funds are deposited in the ICO process and then get released according to these milestones. So we could have a yes vote with respect to a milestone, which would cause the automatic release, or we could have a vote to return the funds. Now, a yes vote requires a simple majority in most cases, if that's how the ICO wants to structure it. A no vote, however, would require a supermajority, a more difficult, larger audience of people to return funds to the token holders. One thing that's, I think, particularly interesting with respect to this project is that Vitalik Buterin himself, in January, published his vision for the future of ICOs. And in his vision, he constructed something called a decentralized autonomous ICO, or a DICO. So we looked at that, and we were, of course, excited as could be that Vitalik himself was proposing a concept where the decision on the release of funds is not only in the hands of the ICO itself, but in the hands of the backers of the ICO. He envisioned something called a tap, a type of valve that would control the flow of funds, whether the funds go quickly to the ICO or slowly to the ICO, depending on the progress of the ICO itself. And that mechanism, though, would be essentially in the hands of the backers of the ICO. So in January, we started our project in October. In January, Vitalik released his vision for this future ICO mechanism, the DICO. And so we did an analysis of what it was that we were creating versus the DICO itself. And we believed what we've done is enhanced the DICO. So our decentralized escrow platform called Incremint, we sometimes also call an enhanced DICO. We offer features that Vitalik's vision doesn't include, like a fiat escrow. It's not a flow release, but rather a tranche release. As you know, when you're building out a company, you need to be able to budget and plan for your expenses. And so we think that a daily flow is not exactly transaction friendly. So we've taken this vision by Vitalik and enhanced it into the decentralized escrow platform. Oh, just a little bit about our team and who we've built around this mechanism. There's 4 of us that are the 4 of us here are the co-founders, and we all come from banking and legal backgrounds, and we all come from groups that I think are internationally recognized in terms of law firms and banks. And then, of course, we're a unique group of ICO founders, launchers, in that we don't come from the development side of the equation. We're not a dev team in the co-founder level, so we've worked hard to bring in 2 people in addition that come from the enterprise and development background. We have Adi, who is our acting CFO. He comes from Applied Blockchain. Our entire development team is based out of London. They're building the smart contract around the multi-sig wallet, which is the escrow wallet. And we have Miles, our CIO. Miles comes from Chase JP Morgan background, where he worked in fintech security. Security is an important part of an escrow platform on the blockchain, as you can imagine. So we've got a good team that are building this out that are internationally recognized. So we're doing our own ICO. not only do we have this platform, we're launching it. Our target launch is April 15th. We're launching our own ICO on March 5th. And in our own ICO, we are issuing our own tokens. They're called mints. And mints provide a 10% discount off of our clients' ICOs. And this was important for us because if you think about it, we're asking people who are launching ICOs to hold back on accessing the funds that are raised in the ICO. At first glance, that might seem counterintuitive. Why would an ICO want to say that they're not going to access the funds they could raise in an ICO? And we really have three value propositions for an ICO. If we've talked to you outside, you might have heard some of what we've said. The three value propositions for an ICO are, one, credibility. An ICO, if they use decentralized escrow, shows credibility. They're saying essentially that, listen, we're not going to take the funds that we raise until we keep the promises we made in our white paper. Investors like that. So credibility is something important for ICOs to demonstrate, and they can do that through escrow. Two, decentralized escrow allows for ICOs to lower the risk environment for their investors. When investors can actually vote on the release or even vote for the return of funds, that's a lower risk proposition for investors. And when investors have a lower risk profile, there's more potential investors and more potential investments. So lower risk for investors is a good thing for an ICO to show. And thirdly, the value proposition for our clients, ICOs themselves, is traffic. ICOs need to find ways to get out the word about what they're doing, and they need to be able to attract investors. So our platform is one in which there is a continual flow of people coming onto our platform to vote on whether releases should happen. They're looking at the pipeline of ICOs coming through the decentralized escrow marketplace. And our token holders allow these ICOs to access a dedicated group of committed ICO investors. Anyone who buys a token for a 10% discount off of other people's ICOs is going to be someone who's looking at how to use these tokens to get those discounts and are particularly interested in ICOs that use decentralized escrow. So we've created that attentive audience of investors who are looking for decentralized escrow for their next target investments. So that's where our tokens come in our ICO. I think that what I like to do at this stage is anticipate some of the questions that we typically are asked in situations like this. I think that we explain what we're doing, we explain what decentralized escrow is, the accountability problem in the marketplace, and there are often several questions that come straight to mind, and I thought that maybe it makes sense to just talk about some of those immediate questions. Yeah, so the first question that we get generally out of someone's mind is, wait a second, what happens if we fix a smart contract that controls the release of funds according to milestones, and then the circumstances change? The milestones are different. You know, you can plan something at the beginning of your ICO, but whether that timeline and those expectations actually hold is a totally different matter. So what we've built into our ICO mechanism is a way for votes to occur that don't move funds, but change the milestones. So the ICOs themselves can go back to their audience of token holders, and they can request a vote to change the timeline or the actual parameters of the milestone. So there is some flexibility there. Smart contracts don't have to be so rigid. We can have a vote to change smart contracts. So that's a key component of what we've built out and thinking through how it works. I guess another question we often get is, how are these escrow, decentralized escrow platform, how is that different from the standard escrow? I mean, lots of ICOs are using escrow today. And how is what we're doing different than escrow that you might see in the ICO marketplace today? It's different because it's decentralized. So you can obviously put your funds in a multi-sig wallet when you do a fundraise in an ICO, and you can hand one of the keys to that wallet to a third party and say, well, you'll turn that key when we meet our milestones. That's a way that escrow can happen today. The problem with that is that these individuals who are the escrow agents or oracles in the ICOs, they're often not exactly neutral third parties. They're paid by the ICOs themselves, and that creates a conflict of interest and a problem. Secondly, they're of course not necessarily experts in the development of the project. It's difficult to know when a minimum viable product has been launched, whether it is viable, etc. So whatever that milestone is, it's best determined by the audience of token backers than by some independent individual who may not have the expertise to know whether or not the milestone's been met. Yeah.
Okay, we can open up for a few questions from the audience for the next 5 minutes. And if you can wait till I bring the microphone to you and speak in the microphone.
First of all, I'm not an attorney, but what I'm curious about is, and I think it's a great solution to a problem. So first of all, we require the token holders, and that's the last thing you said, to have a certain amount of knowledge in order to make an informed decision. So I can see a playing field where some token holders will have more knowledge than others. Do you envision injunctions, sprouting up to halt the release of funds? And the second question was, because this is going to be in a smart contract, so I see, it's an agreement. Therefore, you sort of taking it out of the courts. So would you be recommending arbitration as a way to resolve disputes?
Sure, a couple or three good questions in that question. So this is a self-regulatory mechanism. It's one that the ICOs can impose on themselves. In that process, they disclose in the ICO, in their white paper, in their terms and conditions, how that voting mechanism works. So essentially, there will be disputes. There will be people who perhaps want to release funds and people who don't want to release funds. But at the end of the day, the release happens according to the vote. And the vote is the vote. It's on the blockchain. So, for example, if there's a minority group who got outvoted in respect of a vote, then that's part of the agreement itself that was laid out in the white paper, in the terms and conditions. So there would be no foundation for an injunction in that case if the minority voters got outvoted. I would say, though, that the voting process is one in which we've done a lot of game theory into how these votes can work and whether these votes could be manipulated, and there could be situations where people get an outcome other than what was intended. And so we spent a lot of time on that. I'll just maybe touch on it just barely. So, but happy to talk afterwards as well.
Okay.
So the voting process works such that the release of funds is done according to the majority of votes that are cast. So, for example, if you have 5,000 people 5,000 tokens that are issued, but only 2,000 participate in the vote, it would take 1,001 votes to release funds. So you can't have a holdup just by having a group of people who abstain.
Thank you. Here's the next question from Larry.
Yes, a quick question. So is this a United Nations model for managing an ICO fund? What do you comment about this? Why enterprise needs CEOs and management team, right? So is that a good idea, actually allow the token backers to vote and then using this more like United Nations model to manage the finance aspect of the ICOs?
Well, okay, so this is a global mechanism in that people in ICOs anywhere in the world can use this mechanism. The mechanism doesn't change the fundamentals of the ICO. The ICO still structures its ICO how it wants to. It still has its own management decisions. It only pushes the finite number of decisions in respect of the milestones it decides to self-impose to that audience of voters. So the token holders can't vote on anything. They can't vote on management decisions. They can't vote on how the ICO conducts itself, et cetera. All they can do to vote on is what the ICO decides to push to their token holders in the lead up to the ICO. So when an ICO says, you know what, we can do better if we make these two key decisions, Ones where the token holders participate, they'll do better in their ICO, but they're the ones that decided. The ICO itself is the one that decided which votes get pushed. And all the other decisions in the process still remain with the ICO according to normal structure in an ICO.
Thank you. Here's our next question from Frank.
Hi, thanks. Suppose we trust your voting mechanism, but then how do we trust the release of the fund, that step?
So it's all built into the smart contract. The funds are held into in a wallet. It's a Gnosis wallet. Many of you might be familiar with the Gnosis wallet. And we've just wrapped around the Gnosis wallet the voting contract. The voting contract is one where that is published code that's available for review by the public. On top of that, we're doing a security audit, so we're going to have published the results of our security audit. We believe the fact that we're a Gnosis wallet that has already billions of dollars held in the technology, and the fact that the voting contract is one in which is a relatively simple piece of technology that is reviewed by the public and gone through a security audit, should make people comfortable that the voting mechanism and the release of funds work smoothly.
Okay, and here's a question from Shane.
I apologize if I missed the first couple of minutes, so if you answered this, my apologies in advance. So if folks vote or don't vote to release the funds, do those same folks not receive their tokens so that they couldn't move them off to some peer-to-peer exchange? I mean, would the tokens also be frozen until the funds are released?
No, the tokens, like any ICO, are as liquid as the ICO allows them to be. If they're exchangeable on an exchange and a secondary market occurs, these tokens could change hands, obviously, in any post-ICO environment. The people who vote the tokens are the people who control those tokens at the time of the vote. So if Joe bought the tokens in an ICO, transferred those tokens to Susan, it's Susan who votes the tokens at the time of the vote process. And if the funds are released, it's Susan's tokens who get the pro rata return of funds.
Okay, and here's a question from Louis.
Thank you. Some ICOs are SEC compliant. What does that mean? And if something goes wrong in the process, how does the SEC intervene for the better or for the worst?
Right. So the process by which the ICO structures itself is SEC compliant or not SEC compliant is up to the ICO itself. Whether that ICO chooses to use escrow would not affect the determination of whether their token is a security token or utility token. It doesn't affect the regulatory environment of that ICO. It does, however, enhance the credibility of the ICO in that they've shown that they're willing to stand behind their promises. We are working with the Chamber of Digital Commerce out of DC and their group called the Token Alliance, which is putting together best practices for the ICO ecosystem. And we believe that it's not long until the best practices for ICO will be published, and those best practices will include decentralized escrow as a way to conduct ICOs. We believe that the regulators will welcome self-regulated decentralized escrows. So it is a plus in terms of showing your regulators that you're using good practices.
Great. Thank you very much. Let's give Brian a big round of applause.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
He will be available at 1:05 for the Ask Me Anything time, or you can catch him in the hallway.
Yeah, catch me afterwards outside if you have further questions. We're happy to talk to potential ICOs and, of course, our Mint token investors. So let us know. Thanks much.
Thank you.